Class 1A is back for another season, and there's plenty more action-packed battles, wacky high school antics, and traumatic experiences in store. Let's jump right in with the Forest Training Camp arc. After the mess with Scary Handman in the last season, UA is ramping up their defenses even more and sending the kids to a training camp at a secret location in the woods. When they arrive, they're greeted by the Wild Pussycats, clearly the most elite pro heroes in Japan. Really though, they are surprisingly terrifying. Class 1A is launched into a training regiment clearly much tougher than anything they've experienced before, as they spend the whole day battling their way through the Beast Forest just to make it to the camp, where they spend early mornings and late nights tirelessly training the strength of their quirks. But it turns out that the toughest challenge of them all is actually an angry 5-year-old. Kota is Mandalay's nephew who grew to hate heroes after his pro-hero parents died at the hands of the villain Muscular. Midoriya, in his never-ending pure-heartedness, makes attempts to connect with the boy and tries relating his own struggle being born quirkless. And it's to My Hero Academia's credit that these scenes are very well handled and actually connect with the viewer. It makes sense for Kota to take such a strong position against heroes as a traumatized little kid, and the way that it's portrayed never comes off as annoying or melodramatic. In the same vein, Midoriya's attempts at kindness never feel pushy or like he's overstepping in sensitive territory for Kota, and the two create a believable relationship that pays off later in the storyline. Speaking of, the teachers decide to have the students undergo a test of courage by, doing a haunted trail or something? I'm still a bit confused about what the point of this was, and it seems unnecessarily dangerous. So yeah, danger. Dabi and friends, the Vanguard Action Squad, begin infiltrating the forest, sending out poisonous smoke and attacking the students. Midoriya realizes that Kota is still alone at his mountain hideout from last night and is in danger of being attacked by a villain, and his heroic nature shines through as he drops everything to go rescue him. Meanwhile, Kota is cornered by a masked villain in a suspenseful scene, and the personal stakes of the confrontation are ramped up whenever the villain is revealed to be Muscular, the same villain who killed Kota's parents. I know, you killed my father battle is a little cliche, but it's a good way to make the viewer more invested in the outcome of the fight. Before Muscular can attack, Midoriya jumps in to save the day, and their battle begins. Muscular is, basically just a big pile of muscles, but the way that the anime presents him allows him to be a terrifying opponent. He's a pretty straightforward villain, he's got huge muscles, and he's gonna use them to crush whoever gets in his way. In a sense, this makes him even more terrifying than the more cool and calculating villains like Shigaraki or Dabi. Muscular is purely ruthless, and there's no reason or morality that can hold him back. He's kind of like an evil version of All Might, and so where he represents a simple optimism and perseverance, Muscular represents pure evil and violence. His dialogue and voice acting, in the Japanese version at least, reinforces this theme, and he becomes a pretty memorable antagonist even for his brief appearance in this season. So yeah, Midoriya gets checked hard in this fight, but his courage in the face of evil inspires Kota to throw a rock at Muscular, and he realizes that Muscular is the one he should be angry at, not the heroes. Midoriya, always a sucker for underdog stories, is motivated by Kota's bravery to push through his own numerous injuries and unleash one for all 100% to smash the villain into the wall, and nope, that barely did a thing. I would continue describing the fight at this point, but it basically follows the same pattern of what happened before. Midoriya gets beat up a bunch, Kota is inspired and uses his parents' quirk to distract Muscular, then Midoriya is inspired and unleashes Super Mega United States Detroit Full Caling 100% on Muscular to finally knock him unconscious. Yeah, this fight dragged on a little bit for me. I think it's just because a lot of the Midoriya solo fights are starting to follow the same pattern, so it's not as exciting in my opinion when you can kind of predict what will happen next. And the show is really starting to stretch how much damage Midoriya can take. He's gotten ground pounded like 4 times in this fight, his arm is broken, and there's blood pouring from his head. After Recovery Girl had warned him he can't keep relying on her to heal his injuries, I thought Midoriya was going to be forced to avoid conflicts more, or face serious consequences for these huge injuries to add even more tension to these fights. But he seems to sustain the same kind of injuries he did at the beginning of the show, if not worse ones. Look, I know that no one expects Midoriya to actually die in one of these fights, but when we know he can push through extreme injuries solely on willpower, it takes away any sense of fear that he could lose. And unless there's a really compelling emotional conflict going on in the fight, like with Midoriya versus Todoroki, the battle becomes kind of boring. It's still enjoyable for the greater part of the fight, and Kota's character arc was well done, but it starts to drag on by the end since you're just waiting for the inevitable SMASH! And then bad guy dead, yay. I didn't hate the fight between Midoriya and Muscular. Muscular was a good villain, and it was heartwarming seeing Kota and Midoriya bond in the face of danger. I think it could have just been cut down a bit, and Midoriya's injuries didn't have to be so severe to still get the point across that he's willing to lay down his life for Kota. Midoriya hands Kota over to the care of Aizawa, then runs through the forest to tell Mandalay to telepathically warn the students about the League of Villains' plan to somehow target Bakugo, which Muscular mentioned in an offhand comment. Midoriya then runs through the forest again to find Bakugo, and is attacked by a terrifying version of Dark Shadow. Okay, so what were the teachers planning if Tokoyami accidentally unleashed his quirk when he got scared during the test of courage? All the students would just die? Anyway, Dark Shadow's power does pay off as Midoriya and Shoji lead him to Bakugo and Todoroki, who are currently battling this Voldo-looking dude, and use its powerful form to knock out the villain. At the same time, Class 1B gets a chance to shine as Kendo and Tetsu work together to take out the villain spreading the poisonous gas, Mustard. And I know he's named after mustard gas, but his villain name just being Mustard is really funny to me. Either way, I'm glad we got an action scene with some of Class 1B because it made me realize that Kendo and Tetsu are very likable heroes, and I hope we get to see more of them in the future. Now that the gas is gone, Bakugo and Todoroki are able to use their fire powers and calm down Dark Shadow with the light. Midoriya gets in on the cool group name action and forms the Bakugo Escort Team, and they begin making their way to the camp facility. They encounter Uraraka and Asui on their way, who are in the middle of battle with the creepy schoolgirl Himiko Toga. To be honest, I do find this archetype to be overused and more cheesy than creepy, but hopefully Toga will get a more developed character as the story goes on. Toga takes some of Uraraka's blood before retreating when Midoriya's group arrives. But another villain named Mr. Compress suddenly appears and catches Bakugo and Tokoyami like Pokemon. He reveals the League of Villains' goal, to capture Bakugo and convert him to their side. The heroes chase Mr. Compress as he makes his way to the rendezvous point with some exciting mid-air combat, and the two groups clash once they arrive. Mr. Compress is ready to give the marbles containing Bakugo and Tokoyami to Dabi, but discovers that his pockets are empty as Shoji reveals he swiped the marbles when they hit the ground. The heroes then achieve victory as they escape with their fellow students, and the villains are forced to retreat. Wait. Yo! The marbles were a decoy! Bakugo gets kidnapped! Yes! Okay, let me explain myself first. As an audience member who's supposed to sympathize with Class 1A, I didn't want Bakugo to get kidnapped, no matter how aggravating he can be at times. But the way that this moment challenged my expectations and created an engaging, suspenseful conflict made it one of my favorite parts of the season. Seeing Class 1A truly fail in their objective was something we haven't seen before, and it instantly made me rise up in my seat and gave me a real desire to keep watching to see how they would figure this situation out. For now though, medical workers arrive to help the injured students, and the UA teachers meet to discuss their plan of action. Most of it is figuring out how to do damage control with the bad press and find Bakugo, but President Mike makes the interesting point that there must be an imposter among them. Considering that the training camp location was top secret, someone must have leaked it to the League of Villains. Nothing really comes of the plot point for now, but I hope it gets explored more in the future. Meanwhile, Yaoyorozu shares with All Might and the police force that she placed a tracker on one of the Nomus, and they use it to discover the location of the League of Villains hideout. Kirishima and Todoroki overhear this, and they share with the rest of the class that they want Yaoyorozu to make their own device so that they can rescue Bakugo themselves. Having learned his lesson after his fight with Stain, Ida warns them to leave the mission to the pro heroes, but Kirishima expresses that he's tired of feeling helpless to protect his classmates. The question is left up to Midoriya, who has to decide whether to save his friend or follow the rules in the next arc. The Forest Training Camp arc was an exciting and enjoyable opening to Season 3. It started out with the similar escapades that we know My Hero Academia for, but really ramped up with new villains and stakes by the end. I think it's interesting to compare this villain attack to their attack on USJ in Season 1, and see how much the heroes and villains have grown since then. The underused members of Class 1A and 1B also got a chance to shine, along with new heroes and villains. The Pussycats were a fun play on the anime catgirl archetype, and the Vanguard Action Squad introduced some terrifying new foes like Dabi and Muscular. I'd have to say Twice is my personal favorite though. He had a really fun personality that made him a charismatic villain, and I like Deceased, no! After a well done, action-packed arc, the heroes press on to the Hideout Raid arc. I wonder what they're going to be doing in this one.
FBI, open up!
While they're visiting Midoriya at the hospital, Kirishima attempts to convince his classmates to go through with their Bakugo rescue plan, but Ida, Asui, and Tokoyami argue that as students, it's not their place to get involved. The discussion is cut off when the doctor asks to speak to Midoriya in private, and he reveals that if he continues sustaining the same injuries to his arms, he may not be able to use them again. Yeah, no kidding. He also gives Midoriya a sweet letter from Koda thanking him for saving his life before discharging him for the day. Kirishima, Todoroki, and Yaoyorozu are waiting outside to ask Midoriya again to help them save Bakugo, but Ida also appears and the opposing groups break out into conflict. It's cool to see that Ida has grown since his confrontation with Stain, and it shows that the character arcs Class 1A goes through have lasting impacts. Todoroki is able to calm Ida down when he assures him the group won't attack any of the villains, and they put on some snazzy disguises before following Yaoyorozu's tracker to the villain's hideout. On the way, the heroes are reminded of Yue's own struggles as the public has turned on them for the numerous villain attacks on the school. I really like these plot points because it makes the hero society feel fleshed out and real, and it gives the struggles that the class faces more weight in the grand scheme of things. Meanwhile, the villains are attempting to convince Bakugo of their philosophy, hoping that his hot-headed nature will make him susceptible to joining their side. To their surprise, Bakugo stands his ground, and asserts that he is already determined he will become a hero no matter what. Again, this is why I was glad Bakugo got kidnapped. It ended up being a great way to explore his character and show that even though he can be a jerk sometimes, he really does want to be a hero and stop evil from prospering. At the same time, both the students and pro heroes are closing in on the hideout, and the conflict comes to a head when the pro heroes conduct their raid. We get the return of a lot of pro heroes like Kamui Woods, Best Jeanist, and Gran Torino as they work together under the leadership of All Might to capture the villains. They subdue the villains fairly easily, as well as their backup Nomus, and now we finally get to rescue Bakugo, and what the heck, this is awesome! The heroes are surprisingly stopped once again as a black liquid transports all of the villains away, including Bakugo. All Might, who had already felt guilt for not being there to stop the villain attack at the training camp, is especially angry now and ready to do anything to protect Bakugo. Meanwhile, Best Jeanist and Mount Lady, who had restrained the Nomus behind the hideout, are suddenly attacked by a shadowy figure who knocks out the pro heroes easily, causing the students to cower in fear from their hiding place in a terrifying scene as Midoriya realizes the villain is All For One himself. Uh-oh! After clearing the area of heroes, All For One warps back the villains in Bakugo, and we get a glimpse of the twisted father and son relationship All For One and Shigaraki have. No wonder he's so messed up if this is the guy he looks up to. Midoriya wants to use the moment to jump in and escape with Bakugo, but Ida stops him in a smart move as All Might arrives to face his arch nemesis for a second time. Both All Might and All For One have incredible presence, each one perfectly representing good and evil respectively, and it makes for an engaging fight between the number one hero and villain. Both of the build-up these guys have had really pays off in the fight, and you quickly get a grasp of how powerful they truly are. Unfortunately, All Might struggles in the fight, mainly because he's trying to stop All For One and protect Bakugo at the same time. So Midoriya puts his strategic skill to use and comes up with a plan to save Bakugo. In a high-energy action scene, Ida, Midoriya, and Kirishima jump up in the air just in time for Bakugo to blow himself away from the villains and into their grasp, providing an earned catharsis for the viewer after multiple episodes of build-up and suspense. Gran Torino then dashes into battle to take out the rest of the villains, forcing All For One to warp them away as they have no use for the current fight now that Bakugo has escaped. And now, as All Might and All For One stare each other down on the remains of the demolished hospital ward, the real battle begins. All Might and All For One engage in a physical and ideological clash that is incredibly well done on both fronts. All For One's various quirks add an unpredictability to the battle that forces All Might to find creative ways to use his strength. Along with that, All For One attempts to play on All Might's emotions, mocking him as he recalls when he killed his successor, Nana Shimura. We get to see more of Gran Torino and All Might's mentor and student relationship as Gran Torino advises him not to give in to his emotions and wait until All For One has lowered his guard to attack. Unfortunately, even as All Might does his best to stay strong, his true form is slowly revealed as he runs out of power, and is completely shown whenever he jumps in front of an attack to save a nearby civilian trapped under the rubble. News outlets broadcasting the fight reveal his true form to the country, causing many of the viewers to become demoralized and fear that All Might will be killed. All For One continues his attempts to wear down All Might by revealing that Shigaraki is actually Shimura's grandson. Okay, I really like this fight, but I'll be honest, I didn't get why this upset All Might so much. Like, being a grandson is so far removed that I feel like Shigaraki being related to Shimura really doesn't change anything about either of them as people, but anyway, even when it seems like All For One's victory is all but guaranteed, the public still bands together and cheers All Might on, believing that he will come out on top like he always has. All Might uses the support of the public and memories of his successor Shimura to motivate him to call on the last of One For All, just enough to allow him to activate his arm. Endeavor and Edgeshot then arrive after successfully stopping the Nomus to support All Might, giving him a brief moment to recover and Kamui Woods time to rescue the fallen heroes nearby before being blown away. All for One, now truly angry, creates his own superpower arm using his many quirks, and the two return to their one-on-one battle. All Might takes Gran Torino's advice and uses clever strategy to get All for One into a vulnerable spot, before summoning the last of One for All and unleashing his most powerful attack, United States of Smash. A giant tornado forms, sending nearby news helicopters and buildings flying into the air, and All for One is crushed into a crater in the ground. The dust clears, and All Might stands victorious, forcing himself to summon his hero form one last time as the public cheers his name. He gives out one final message to the news camera, pointing as he says, "Next, it's your turn," which Midoriya realizes is meant to say that it's his turn to become the symbol of peace, causing him to break down in tears. At the same time, Shigaraki watches the battle from his own hideout, and interprets the message as his calling to get revenge on the next symbol of peace for defeating his master, setting up the new conflict between Midoriya and Shigaraki. The All Might and All for One fight is probably my favorite battle of My Hero Academia, next to the Midoriya and Todoroki fight. It's hard to describe in writing how good it is since so much of it is due to the show's presentation. The animation looks incredible and has so much energy in it, the music and sound effects elevate the emotions of the battle, and the Japanese voice actors sell the characters of All Might and All for One so well. Most of all though, the way the writing carries out the fight makes it a step above the rest. It cuts between the battle itself, the public's reactions, and All Might's flashbacks in a way that enhances the tension of the fight rather than interrupting it. Thinking back to the first season, I remember how excited the show was able to make me feel when All Might arrived at USJ to stop the villains. This fight took that heroic feeling and amplified it by 10, creating an incredible battle that is definitely worth all of the build-up it's gotten. Still, even though All for One is now in jail, society still has to deal with the consequences of All Might's son retirement, especially considering now Endeavor is the #1 hero. Well, good luck everyone! Still, even among all the media frenzy and politics, we truly feel the consequences of this change when All Might meets Midoriya on the beach where he first trained to inherit One for All. All Might scolds Midoriya for recklessly trying to save Bakugo, but they still share a heartfelt scene as All Might promises to be a better mentor and help Midoriya become the hero he needs to be. Meanwhile, Principal Nezu decides it'd be safer for the UA students to live in dorms on campus so that they can be better protected as well as spend more time training. And All Might and Aizawa travel to the students' homes to tell their parents about the change. We get to meet Bakugo's parents, which explains a lot about him, and we also learn that Bakugo is further questioning All Might's relationship with Midoriya as he questions the hero about it directly. All Might also travels to Midoriya's house to tell him of the change, but his mother expresses her pent-up concerns about her son constantly risking his life to be a hero. It's a fairly interesting emotional conflict, but nothing really comes of it as Midoriya and All Might pretty easily convince her to let him become a hero. Overall, the Hideout Raid arc is my favorite arc of Season 3. We got to see interesting team-ups between Class 1A, the pro heroes, and the villains. And of course, we got to see the fated rematch between All Might and All for One, which definitely lived up to its hype. But as much as I enjoy all of this high-stakes conflict and action, I think I'm ready for a break with some lighthearted dorm life antics, so let's move on to the next arc. Class 1A begins life in their new dorms, as well as new training for special moves, because it's not a shonen anime if the characters don't have special moves. This part of the arc is fairly standard, besides a fun reappearance of Mei Hatsume from the last season, as well as Midoriya's new shoot style, which focuses on using One for All in his legs in order to make up for his weakened arms. After some more training and dorm antics, the UA students head off for the Provisional Hero License exam. Once they arrive, they are met with some of the other high schools across Japan, such as Shiketsu High School, which is home to the incredibly energetic Inasa Yoarashi, who makes a big impression right from his entrance. They're then approached by Miss Joke, a teacher at Ketsubutsu High School and Eraserhead's complete opposite. The other students express their respect for Class 1A after all the villain invasions they've been through, but it soon turns out that this respect may not be as well-meaning as the students thought. With the beginning of the first part of the exam, where they must throw dodgeballs at 3 targets placed on each student to pass, comes the crushing of UA from all of the less respected hero schools. Still, Class 1A is able to show off their improved teamwork and new special abilities as they fend off the other competitors. As the crowd begins to disperse, Midoriya finds himself cornered against one of the Shiketsu High students named Kami, who quickly quickly uses the opportunity to hit one of his targets, and hey, keep your hands off Midoriya! Anyway, the creepy girl says some creepy stuff and causes Midoriya some trouble by using her quirk to disguise as Uraraka before Uraraka and Sarah ward her off. She cryptically tells Uraraka that she can tell Midoriya cares about her very much before leaving. From this point on, we jump back and forth between the smaller groups of Class 1A as they attempt to knock out enough targets to pass. Todoroki passes on his own with ease and finds himself in the waiting room with Yoarashi from before, who also single-handedly eliminated 120 students with his tornado quirk. Jiro, Yayorozo, Shoji, and Asui work together against a group of heroes from Seiyai Academy led by the strategists Saiko and Telly. Bakugo, Kirishima, and Kaminari face off against the Meatball Man, while Midoriya, Uraraka, and Sero create a trap to knock out some students and pass the test. The exam concludes when Ida and Aoyama work together to unite the rest of Class 1A against the other students, and we get a special focus on Aoyama as he learns to be proud of his power and uses it to lead everyone to the same place so that they can just barely pass the exam in time. Nothing of intense story significance happens in this part of the exam, and the main appeal is getting to see all of Class 1A work together in different teams and show off their new abilities. It's all well done and engaging to watch, and getting to see certain characters like Yayorozo, Kaminari, and Aoyama grow past their limited roles in the previous seasons was really cool. Along with Class 1A, some students from Ketsubutsu and Shiketsu High also get a spotlight, specifically Midoriya's reskin Yoshindo and Yoarashi, who I mentioned earlier and I'm gonna mention more now because it's time for the second part of the exam. The testers must navigate a destroyed version of the battlefield from earlier and conduct rescue procedures after a mock terrorist attack. But as they anxiously wait to begin the next test, Todoroki confronts Yoarashi in the waiting room, having noticed the cold glares he's been giving him. Yoarashi decides to be honest with him and shares that he hates both Todoroki and Endeavor, and that he can see Endeavor's anger in Todoroki's eyes. Todoroki doesn't get a chance to respond before Yoarashi walks away, but his words still stick with him as they go into the test. After some minor slip-ups at the beginning, Midoriya and Ko get their acts together and use creative combinations of their quirks to effectively rescue survivors of the attack, being graded by these actors along the way. Well, except for Bakugo, but he's always an exception, isn't he? As usual, just when it seems like the heroes finally have the upper hand, a group of heroes led by one of my new favorite pro heroes, Gang Orca, bursts into the arena acting as the terrorist group here to take out any remaining survivors. Gang Orca targets the first aid station, but Class 1A and Ketsubutsu High begin evacuating the injured victims while Todoroki jumps in to take on Gang Orca. Yoarashi joins the fight, despite Todoroki telling him to focus on the rescue mission instead, and the two powerful fighters become the weakest in the room when their fire and wind quirks start working against each other. Uh-oh, a low point in the battle? Time for a sad backstory. Surprisingly, we learn from Yoarashi that he actually admired Endeavor, as he saw him as an energetic hero that would tirelessly fight villains. But his cruel nature was revealed to him when he denied the young Yoarashi an autograph. You think this man just kicks puppies for fun? Yoarashi's bad streak with the Todoroki family continued when he and Todoroki competed in the UA entrance exam, and Yoarashi managed to just beat Todoroki at the end, leaving the supposed prodigy in second place. Even as Yoarashi tries to be friendly with Todoroki afterwards, he still treats him coldly and views him as a nuisance, as he did for most people during Season 1 admittedly. Then, Yoarashi literally drops out of UA and changes schools just to spite Todoroki, which, pretty iconic, and has held this hatred of Todoroki all the way up to the hero license exam. As Todoroki and Yoarashi continue to argue, they fail to control their quirks and almost hit an unconscious Shindo with a wave of fire, only for Midoriya to pull him away just in time and knock some sense into the two. Yoarashi and Todoroki individually realize their own personal failings, as Yoarashi sees that this hatred of Todoroki is the same flaw that he criticized Endeavor for, and Todoroki realizes that he can't run away from his past and must face his complicated history head-on like he did at the sports festival. In this time, Gang Orca immobilizes them both, but with some help from Shindo and Midoriya, they're able to regain their strength and combine their quirks to create a swirling inferno that holds Gang Orca off until the other heroes can arrive. With that, Todoroki and Yoarashi barely survive the ending of the exam as all of the survivors are officially rescued. But, somewhat surprisingly, the two aren't saved by an unexpected caveat or given bonus points for effort, and they actually fail the exam and don't get their licenses. Well, along with Bakugo, but again, he yelled at two victims of a terrorist attack, so Still, despite this failure, Todoroki and Yoarashi are able to make amends, and they both take responsibility for their own actions rather than try to assign blame to one person or the other. They promise to each work hard to complete the training course required to obtain their provisional hero licenses. This brief storyline between Todoroki and Yoarashi might not sound like anything special, but it ended up being my favorite part of the license exam. It was interesting to see two heroes be angry with each other rather than with the villain, as I feel like that's a unique conflict that creates a lot of compelling character drama. And in this case, it was especially effective as it continued Todoroki's character development from the previous season in a realistic way, showing that one therapy session with Midoriya isn't just gonna cure him of all of his issues with his father. Admittedly, I've always found Todoroki's arc to be one of the most compelling of the show, and Yoarashi became a personal favorite for me from his first appearance, so I probably have some bias towards this storyline. Still, I'm sure most fans can agree that it's another great example of My Hero Academia's impressive ability to interweave action with character drama. As the heroes celebrate their victory, evil begins lurking once again in the shadows, and it's revealed that that creepy Cammy girl was actually Toga in disguise using her transform quirk. She tells Mr. Compress that the infiltration was successful, and she even got a vial of Midoriya's blood. Great. Anyway, we open on this depressed guy smoking in his house and watching the news. Wait, it's Twice? Wow, okay, Twice actually has a really dark backstory about his clones turning against him and trying to kill each other, and now he's constantly on the verge of falling into insanity if he can't keep his mind stable. I'm kinda surprised I haven't heard as much about Twice as I have with the other League of Villain members, because his character has been the most disturbing so far. Along with Twice, we also learn more about a new villain named Overhaul, who was rocking the pandemic aesthetic before it was cool. We don't find out much about him yet, but he manages to establish a threatening presence in only a brief scene, so I'm looking forward to seeing him as a greater antagonist for the next season. We get to revisit the All Might and All For One plotline as All Might interrogates the villain in a maximum security prison. He questions All For One as to why he's kept himself alive for so long and what his ultimate goal is, but All For One simply states that he wants to be the ruler of all evil in the same way All Might wants to be the symbol of peace. Admittedly, All For One's motivations are a bit uninteresting compared to the other antagonists of the series, but My Hero Academia knows this, and so they don't rely on him too much as the main antagonist. He also just has a great personality as a villain, and is really effective at inspiring fear in the viewer just from the way he speaks and presents himself. He's even able to get under All Might's skin, but the police end their interview before the conflict can escalate, and the viewers are left with a sense of foreboding over how society will adapt to the death of the symbol of peace. Although, all of this makes me wonder why they don't just give All For One the death penalty. Even if he's in a prison at the center of the earth or whatever, who knows what he could still do, and it's not like he's going to give them any valuable information anyway. But enough discussions of the ethics of criminal justice, let's talk about the real issues of our time. Are Midoriya and Bakugo finally gonna stop having a toxic friendship? After everyone else goes to sleep, Bakugo takes Midoriya to the site of the battle trial where they fought for the first time, and confronts him about his building suspicions that Midoriya inherited the One For All quirk from All Might. Midoriya is forced to surrender the truth, but questions how knowing the truth about his quirk changes anything for Bakugo, to which Bakugo asserts that seeing someone like Midoriya be chosen by All Might over him infuriates him. Bakugo begins attacking Midoriya, who does his best to defend himself while also trying to stop the fight. Bakugo shares his frustrations from his childhood with Midoriya, and how no matter what he did to try to intimidate him, Midoriya would always be falling behind him. And yet today, their roles have been reversed as Bakugo feels he can't reach Midoriya's superior skill level. In a surprising moment of vulnerability, Bakugo expresses his guilt over All Might's end as the symbol of peace, believing that if he had just been stronger, he wouldn't have gotten kidnapped and caused All Might and All For One to fight in the first place. It's a welcome moment of depth for Bakugo that leaves an impact on the audience and Midoriya, but Bakugo's not the kind of guy to just cry and hug it out, so the battle continues. Midoriya realizes now that Bakugo won't be happy unless he gives him a true fight, and so he stops holding back. Still, Bakugo manages to knock him down, expressing how he hates that Midoriya always seems to get back up no matter what, and arrogantly views himself as better than Bakugo. Midoriya refutes this, saying how he always admired Bakugo as a powerful hero like All Might. With that, he becomes even angrier than before, and the battle grows even more intense. Despite ramping up All For One to 8% power, Bakugo manages to catch Midoriya off guard and pin him onto the ground. claiming victory. At that point, All Might arrives to officially end the fight, having been alerted of the conflict by a nearby security bot. Bakugo uses the moment to question All Might himself on why he gave his quirk to Midoriya, and All Might shares how he recognized Midoriya's selfless bravery as being a key trait for the next symbol of peace. He assures Bakugo that his quirk is strong enough on its own, and so he doesn't need the help of One for All to be a powerful hero. Bakugo asserts the opposite, repeating his sentiment from earlier that he's the reason All Might lost his power. All Might once again cements his dad status as he comforts Bakugo, promising him that it wasn't his fault for what happened, and that he would have eventually lost his power one way or another. As they head back to the dorms, All Might helps Midoriya and Bakugo realize that they are both flawed in different ways, with Midoriya being so focused on rescuing others and Bakugo being so focused on achieving victory that neither of them can be truly effective as heroes. The two then form a proper rivalry that harnesses their competitiveness with each other to constantly push each other further than before, helping to smooth over some of the negatives of their relationship. In my opinion though, this rivalry feels kind of one-sided, and it reflects My Hero Academia's messy handling of Midoriya and Bakugo's relationship in general. The show seems to want me to be really invested in their dynamic at this point, but even after all this time, I just don't find it all that compelling. I feel like the show is trying to make it deeper than it is, when really it's just Midoriya having an unhealthy admiration for the kid who bullied and harassed him all his life. Maybe if Midoriya had become more aggressive towards Bakugo after finally becoming tired of all of his mistreatment, then it would feel more like the two have a genuine rivalry rather than one person constantly antagonizing the other. I think I'd like it better if it was more like the dynamic between Midoriya and Todoroki during their tournament battle, where Midoriya's ferocity in the fight inspired Todoroki to grow in an unconventional way by forcing him to confront his inner demons. Still, even if I'm not sold on Midoriya and Bakugo's relationship, I appreciated that Bakugo got his own development in the battle, and seeing him wrestle with a sense of failure and guilt over what happened to All Might made me engaged in his character for the first time. I also really enjoyed the choreography and animation of this fight. My Hero Academia often has fairly large-scale battles with multiple heroes and villains in play, but the show's also really good at doing simple one-on-one fistfights like this. Once Midoriya and Bakugo return to the dorm, Dad number 2 comes in as Aizawa places the boys on house arrest for the next few days. While they stay back to clean the dorm, the rest of UA attends an assembly where Principal Nezu shares that it's time to start their hero work studies, which will basically be a more advanced version of their internships. After this point, we move into the Shie Hasaikai arc, but there's literally only 2 episodes of it in this season, and yeah, I love Mirio, but I wish he wasn't naked all the time. Honestly, that's all I really have to say for now, and I'm looking forward to talking more about the big 3, Sir Night-Eye, and Overhaul in the next video. So let's finally bring this one to a close. Usually, at this point I would talk about how much this season has improved on the last one, and that's not entirely true. I'll just be honest with you, I don't think I liked Season 3 more than Season 2. The Hideout Raid arc was the standout storyline for me of this season, and everything else was just at the regular standard. Even so, that standard is a very high one to meet, and the fact that My Hero Academia consistently reaches and even surpasses it goes to show how good of an anime it is. And most other weaker shows would have started to experience seasonal rot at this point, so I'm glad that MHA continues to stay above the level of quality viewers have come to expect. Let's hope for more strong action, engaging characters, and emotional storylines in the future, and I'll see you all next time for Season 4. Bye!